Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Called Bank Sports, where I'm still kind of in shock yesterday when I got the notification that Dwyane Wade is going to be a minority owner in the Utah Jazz. So Dale and I are super excited about this, and I think that this is a lot more than, just having him throw some money at it and kind of being there as financial support. I really think that Dwyane Wade's going to take the Jazz to the next level as an organization. And Dale, so we're going to start off by discussing how we feel about that and then kind of get to the Donovan Mitchell injury. There's been an update recently and discuss how we think that'll impact the Jazz up to this point. So Dwyane Wade joining the Utah Jazz, I had no idea. He's a really good friend of Ryan Smith's, so that makes a lot of sense. And I think it'll be really big to have a former player who is going to be able to help from a business side, but definitely from a free agency side is where I really think this is going to be big. So Dale, what are your thoughts and kind of what are you excited for about Dwyane Wade joining the Utah Jazz?
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks for me. So I'm glad we're bringing it up on this episode so we can kind of talk through it and kind of figure out what we think his actual role will be. Because on the stream last night after the Pacers game, that was something we were talking about a lot. And I was just sitting there, I'm like, yeah, that'd be cool, but I have no clue exactly what he's doing. What we do know is Dwyane Wade. He said that this is a financial decision because he wants to grow in the business side of basketball, but it's also he wants to be involved in the team and understand the organization better. I don't know what his exact goals are, except for that he wants to be involved and that he thinks that this is a big growth opportunity for him. And most players, I would imagine, like if you want to have a growth opportunity in the business side, you just go be like an assistant GM for the Heat in his case. But he actually invested to the Jazz, which is awesome because that's more than just like, okay, let me test this out. Let's see if I like it. An investment to buy part of the Jazz is a huge commitment. And it's not like he's going to be tired of them in 3 years and then dip to another team. But I don't know. Like, I'm curious to hear what you have to say about like what you think he'll actually bring to the table and what his role will be in the organization.
I'm really super intrigued to see what he does. I mean, Quinn Snyder did mention that he's going to talk to Dwyane Wade and maybe pick his brain some. And I mean, Dwyane Wade is a great basketball mind, just like Quinn Snyder. So being able to have those discussions are something that, yeah, they could have had before he was an owner, but it's something that they might even be more inclined to have. And that could be concerning with some owners. Like, I think we all would agree that James Dolan in New York being too hands-on of an owner is the worst thing that has ever happened to the Knicks and is why they're such a travesty right now. So obviously Dwyane Wade isn't going to be able to go and say like, hey, we're making this trade. This is the draft pick. And he might have some thoughts on it. But overall, the biggest thing that just keeps coming to mind for me is who went and knocked on LeBron James' door at 10 p.m. Pacific time and said, hey, we want you to be a Laker. I mean, it was Magic Johnson. And Dwyane Wade isn't Magic Johnson. I get that. But if you're a free agent, if you're a 20-something-year-old sitting down in a room in Utah and you have Donovan Mitchell in that room, you have Rudy Gobert, you have Ryan Smith, who's just a young, super energetic owner, and then you have Dwyane Wade, like someone you watched playing basketball when you were growing up, and Dwyane Wade says, "Hey, we want you here in Utah." I mean, that's just another level of someone with a championship pedigree who's going to be a Hall of Fame player, one of the best shooting guards to ever play the game. I feel like that just overall brings this weight behind the Jazz as an organization. And then also, I mean, especially because he is Black, he is African American. And that's something that if you live in Salt Lake City and if you live in Utah and you look around, there's not a lot of Black people here. So having somebody who is very similar to a lot of the players and saying like, hey, no, I do like Utah. It is a good place. Like, come here, just adds a lot more weight to it. So that's where I think overall it's going to be really big, is being able to retain players like Donovan Mitchell, but also hopefully bring in new players, bring in new stars to be able to win a championship here in the next few years and maybe become the next Golden State. Do I think that's going to happen? No, but that would be really cool to see the Jazz get to that level of competition.
I don't know that I feel it's a slight off track with the Golden State thing, but like,
I think kind of went
the
pretty
offense,
far, but
I think the offense of the Jazz is like really similar, and the talent that the Jazz have is really similar to the Golden State. Those the year before they won and the year that they won the first one. So, I like different teams, but I think there's a lot of similarities there. But getting back to Dwyane Wade, one thing that I want to see him do, I would love, whether this is like his official role or if he just kind of does this because he does it, but I would love to see him be like one of the in-between guys between the players and the organization, the players in the front office. Obviously, I'm pretty sure the Jazz have it set up where the players and the front office can interact whenever, like, it's not like they're separate. But I know that there's this feeling around the league that a lot of players don't trust front offices. They may go to them and say, hey, this is what I want, but they know in the back of their head, like, there's no guarantee they're getting that, unless they're like a big enough star like Anthony Davis. So like with the JJ Redick trade to Dallas, on his podcast, I thought this was really interesting because players haven't had a voice like this in the past. But he came out, he had a whole 10-15-minute segment explaining what happened with the trade, how he asked the Pelicans that he wanted to be closer to his family, who was living in Brooklyn. So he's saying, trade me to the Knicks, trade me to the Nets, trade me to Philly. It was basically like the teams that he would feel okay playing around because that way he could be close to his family. And then they traded him to Dallas. And then he had to like backtrack. He's like, I love Dallas. I love Mark Cuban. Like, I'm excited to play there, but it was
not what I wanted.
Further away than what I wanted. So I'm like, so I think that kind of expresses a sentiment that a lot of players have. But if you have someone like Dwyane Wade coming to you and saying, hey, like, we're a players organization, we want to do what's best for you, and that's going to make a player a lot more comfortable, especially like a young rising star player saying, okay, yeah, I'll come to the Jazz. I have Dwyane Wade's word that it's going to work out for me. And then if it doesn't, I have his word that they're going to do good by me. And so, and he, like you said, like Dwyane Wade, like he's a trusted guy around the league. He's one of the best shooting guards ever. So people are going to listen to him more than someone who's like currently playing for the organization, obviously.
No, I definitely agree with that. And I think it's kind of a rough spot. Like, the biggest issue with JJ Redick is he asked for that trade before the season. So it wasn't like he said, oh, I want to get on the Blake Griffin and I want to get on the James Harden bandwagon and go to the Nets. But when he asked for that trade, he was promised that he would get that trade. Mm-hmm. That he was promised that if he didn't want to stay in New Orleans, they'd send him up there. So that's the thing that I would be careful with if I'm the Jazz. As much as they are a players organization and want to continue to be that, is never make a promise that you're not 100% sure you're going to keep, since obviously JJ Redick is still a good player in today's NBA. You know, he still carries value. And I do think that the Dallas trade was the better trade for the Pelicans organization. But once you go and you promise JJ Redick, hey, don't worry, if you want to leave New Orleans, we're going to send you to New England, then you put yourself in a bind there when you don't send him there. So that's the hardest thing I think about like giving players promises, is then you have to keep promises. And sometimes you end up in a business, I mean, especially from a business side, things change so frequently that you can make a promise one day and then all of a sudden the reasons you made that promise just don't line up anymore.
Yeah, you always want to under-promise and over-deliver, but at least if you can't over-deliver, under-promise, so that way you're not like stuck in a corner.
Yeah, definitely. So I think overall he's just going to bring a lot to the Jazz. And I think there's a lot that we're not going to see because, I mean, most of the time you don't get to where Dwyane Wade got by being dumb. Like, he's a really smart guy. To be able to process what's going on the court, to be a ball handler like that, you need to be intelligent. And he obviously seems to have a great business acumen. I'm sure that Ryan Smith believes that. I mean, when you think about it, what have Dwyane Wade and Ryan Smith been discussing these last 6 or so years that they've been friends? There's been some basketball, I'm sure, but I'm sure there's a lot of business to it. So they have that intimate knowledge of each other's understanding of business and basketball. And Dwyane Wade's, I'm sure, going to have to learn a lot, but I'm sure a lot will be going on behind the scenes of things that we just don't see. And we'll be able to see a fraction of it, in whether or not a free agent decides to come to Utah. How Donovan Mitchell continues to improve, if he ends up investing more time in that relationship than he has in the past, which he's already put a lot of time into to begin with.
Yeah, I'm really excited for what's going to happen. There's a lot of question marks, and that I feel like you brought up the Ryan Smith Dwyane Wade relationship a couple times, and I don't think that was only a big decision. Obviously, that was big to get Dwyane Wade here. But thinking about that, if Ryan Smith has been talking to someone like Dwyane Wade, that gives me a lot more confidence in him as an owner. Because if you think of like the Millers were awesome, I didn't want them to sell until I found out it was Ryan Smith, right?
Definitely best one too. But
with him, if he's been talking to players like Dwyane Wade for a long time, he understands the player side of things. He understands a lot of the behind the scenes basketball stuff in the NBA that you don't really get to see as a fan. And then also he's a businessman who knows how to market. So if the combination of Ryan Smith and Dwyane Wade, since Salt Lake City has this reputation of, oh, don't go there, it's too small of a city, there's you're not going to grow your career outside of basketball there. It's just not the place to be. There's no nightlife or anything. But if anyone can market Utah to the right people and convince them to come to Utah, it's going to be a combination of Ryan Smith and Dwyane Wade. So I'm excited. I think Jazz fans, for the most part, have never considered getting a big time free agent. But with this combo, I think we're going to at least go after them. Whether we get them or not, we don't know. That's up to the players, but at least we're going to have the chance now.
Hey, Dwyane Wade and LeBron James are really good friends. Maybe this is going to line up.
We get LeBron James and LeBron James Jr.
Oh my gosh, that would be crazy. No, one thing though that I keep forgetting to bring up is, so Shaq has been talking a lot of crap on Jazz players this season and this past offseason, as everyone knows. And who's been the guy coming up and defending Jazz players and defending what's happening? It's been Dwyane Wade, which I'm sure is genuine in some level, but it makes you wonder how long this deal has been in the works and how much that was part of Dwyane Wade preparing to be a Jazz owner, was coming out and being hey, stop saying all this crap, Shaq. So we've definitely got a player who does have Jazz players back. Got an owner who does have Jazz players backs. And this is going to be fun. If you told me what was going to happen a year ago, if you said the Jazz are going to have the 1 seed, the Jazz are going to sell, I would have not thought the Jazz were going to sell, but again, I think Ryan Smith is a great owner. And then if you said, and Dwyane Wade is going to be part of the Utah Jazz ownership, and you told me that, I would have asked what you were smoking, because this is not what I foresaw happening this season at all.
And Mike Conley was going to be an all-star, because last year he was not playing like an all-star.
No, he definitely wasn't. It's been such a great season, and Dale and I are going to get here into a second on how that kind of got derailed yesterday in the third quarter, with Donovan Mitchell getting a low ankle sprain. But it's just been an awesome season so far.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes on. But with the injury with Mitchell, first off, before we talk about the injury, and I talked about this on the stream, but I want to bring it up again. The Jazz were playing awful against the Pacers. They had a couple like okay moments, but they were just some brain dead moments. Like right at the end of the second quarter, they gave up 6 points in 3 seconds. And so like the Jazz were playing awful. Then about 8 minutes left in the third quarter, Donovan Mitchell gets injured. There's no like good camera angle of what happened, so we're not like exactly sure what happened, but he's injured. And after that, it took him forever to walk off the court. Like that's the scariest thing to see your star player do. And then the Jazz started playing with energy. They came together. They made every possession count. They were more aggressive on offense and defense, and they came back from double digits and ended up winning by 8. So it's sad that Mitchell was injured, but I love seeing a team see their best player get injured and then rally around like the Jazz did there.
Yeah.
I love that.
The Jazz have definitely shown the ability these last 4 games to have comebacks, right? I mean, I believe they were down double digits against Portland. They went and won that game. They Sacramento, they pretty much won that game outright. Washington down double digits, still lost, but came back and made a game of it at the end. They got close there. And then to be down double digits against Oklahoma City and Indiana and come back and win both of those games, they've shown that what happened at the beginning of the year, where they'd get down big and then lose, they've shown an ability this last week, to get down big and then win against lesser caliber opponents. That's going to be harder against, the top tier teams, but they've shown an ability to keep fighting and to win those games, which is just really what you want to see from the Jazz, that when there is adversity, they end up pulling it out, that it's not just, we get up by 15 in the first quarter and then just hold on to the lead, that they can be down by 15 and still make a game of it at the end. And I was shocked to see that the Jazz won yesterday. I started taking an exam in the game, so wasn't really watching or paying attention. And frankly, I expected them to lose, especially when I had seen that Donovan Mitchell got injured. But that was a crazy game, and it was awesome to see Bojan come out and definitely show some more flashes of his former self.
Yeah, I love that, but and we're going to need to see that, because the update on Mitchell is he's going to be out for probably around 2 weeks, depending on how it's not a major sprain. MRI came back clean, no structural damage, no break.
Thank goodness.
So
really, that was terrifying.
So 2 weeks, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I've noticed NBA players do tend to heal faster. I don't know if that's because they just have a lot of attention from doctors. I don't know if it's like when they're injured, their full-time job is healing, and it's probably also that they're healthier than most of us. They're in great shape, so their body's probably in a better position to do that. But looking at the schedule, let's just say he's out for 2 weeks. So he's definitely going to miss the Los Angeles games, and so that goes 2 weeks will be he may or may not be coming back for the Suns game. That's like right at the end of the 2 weeks.
Yeah, let's just say I think it's probably best to assume he's not. He might just not travel with the team for that road trip. And then you have the home game against Toronto on May 1st. And that's kind of like the earliest I'd see him being back.
Yeah. I might want to
see him back
wait a
against
little
Phoenix,
bit.
But
yeah, if he's questionable for Phoenix, don't do it. If he's and maybe if he's like fine but like just barely got cleared, I'd almost not want him to play, even though it's going to be a big game, and then just rest him against like Toronto and one of the San Antonio games, just like make sure that he doesn't get hurt again, and then get him in there and
get him warmed
up in the
up
second
and ready
San
for
Antonio
Denver.
game. Yeah.
Which I'm really glad that Donovan will be back so soon. Really still stinks for Jamal Murray. And that's just kind of random to throw in here. But I mean, that duel was one of the best playoff competitions I've ever seen last season. So just to know that you're not going to see Jamal be able to have that chance this year, and probably even next year, really just stinks for the NBA as a whole.
It does open up the Western Conference, though. It's sad.
But like the tiniest bit. That's what's so crazy. Like, even with Jamal Murray being out, it's still like, oh well. I mean, if you're the Jazz, you're like, do we get to play Luka, Zion, Steph Curry, or Damian Lillard in the first round? Which like name do we get to play? Do we get to play probably the next LeBron James and the next best player in discussion for best player of all time in Luka Doncic? Do we get to play Steph Curry and Damian Lillard? Or do we get to play Zion Williamson, who also, I don't think he's as good as Luka, but could very well be in the discussion here in the next few years as Steph or Luka, not Steph, sorry, Zion Williamson or Luka Doncic, who's the best player in the NBA. Like, I think that's going to be the discussion, and the fact that they're going to be battling in the play-in tournament just blows my mind.
Yeah, Zion's not being talked about enough. It's probably because his team's not doing great, but he is playing incredible basketball.
I think in a year where you don't have the top 7 teams of the West being legitimate playoff contenders, Zion would be getting a lot more talk. But when you're not going to be floored if any of the top 7 teams go out and win it, which is just what blows my mind, since who might you kind of be surprised on? Okay, maybe Dallas. But if Nurkic comes back, then all of a sudden you've got this Portland team who can shore up their defense with him and just go out and just absolutely dominate. That wouldn't surprise me. It would be crazy, but it wouldn't be something that I just thought would never happen.
Yeah. And the West is just so tight.
Tight, yeah.
Yeah. But with that said, I get the two things I want to bring up with the Donovan Mitchell injury, other than what we brought up, expect him to be out for about 2 weeks. But the two things are, one, how do you think this will impact the race for number 1? Do you think this will put the Jazz at a disadvantage and we might have to finish up 2 with how good the Suns are playing? And the second thing, do you think this will give a chance to the other Jazz players who have been in shooting slumps to come back, get back into their rhythm, so that when Donovan Mitchell comes back, it's just a plug and play and the team's ready for him?
Yeah, I definitely think that this is an opportunity to hopefully get Jordan Clarkson a bit out of his slump, but definitely Bojan Bogdanovic. If Bojan's able to get to the point where you can expect 15 plus points from him a game, that instantly just raises the Jazz's level of competition, level of ability to compete just by a lot. So that's really what I want to see, is if we're able to get Bojan back, that'll be the best thing for the Jazz. I know there were a lot of people who wanted to trade him at the deadline, and I don't necessarily think that was the right decision, but I see why people would want that to happen. And I think that he has a chance to come back, especially where he's been playing pretty well these last few games. And if he gets back to, 80-90% of his former self, that gives me a lot more confidence that the Jazz will be able to make it to the Western Conference Finals, even if they end up playing the Lakers in the second round. I do think it's going to get tight. The real question is, when starting on Monday, this is the Suns schedule in order: Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Boston, Brooklyn, then play the Knicks, then play the Lakers. Sorry, not the Lakers, the Clippers. That's a 6-game stretch there.
Brutal schedule.
That's brutal. And if they go 4-2, or if they go 5-1, then I don't know if the Jazz can keep the 1 seed. But I think they're more inclined to split it, especially when Philadelphia, Boston is a back-to-back. Brooklyn, New York is a back-to-back. Then you have to fly all the way to Phoenix to play LA. So I really think we need to see the Suns go 3-3 in that stretch, or 4-2 or 2-4 for the Jazz for me to feel really confident about the Jazz getting the 1 seed. The Jazz might drop 1 or 2 games they wouldn't have over the course of the Donovan Mitchell injury, which still gives the Jazz a leg up. But it's gonna be rough, and the Suns might be able to steal the 1 seed, and the Donovan Mitchell injury might be why. But I'm still inclined to think that that's not going to happen, and that the Jazz will be able to keep the 1 seed.
Yeah, and looking at that tough schedule for the Suns, the Jazz are right there at the end of it, and like we're looking from the Jazz's perspective, but from the rest of the NBA, you're looking like, oh, like you're playing like the top 2 teams in the East, the top team in the West, the 3rd seed in the West, and like Boston and New York, who are both playoff teams. And
New York being the one that might be the best rest, and Boston, having one of the most bipolar seasons in NBA history. But I hadn't thought about that. The Jazz are going to be getting the Suns when the Suns are tired. They're going to have been fighting a lot, and even if they pick up those wins, it could be prime for the Jazz to beat them, even without Donovan. Mm-hmm. I definitely think that, we have enough guard depth that the Jazz are capable of winning a lot of games without Donovan. The scariest thing yesterday in the game for me was that Derek Favors was taking the day off, and it's like, who's going to be getting the backup center minutes? So I do think that it's not as terrible to have Donovan out as it is to have Gobert or Favors out from a depth standpoint for the Jazz.
Definitely, yeah, because when Mitchell's out, you have a lot of other ball handlers. You have Conley, you have Ingles, you have Clarkson, and then there's a number of other people that aren't typically ball handlers off the bench, but can be. Yeah,
and you can bring in Brantley, or you can bring in Mia Oni. You can bring in those players to I guess Brantley's at power forward, listed at power forward, but you can bring in Oni as a really strong guard who would be starting on other teams in the league, or not starting, but getting significant bench minutes, and bring him into the rotation. And that works out pretty well for the Jazz. Of course, the Jazz, though, one of their power forwards is 6'5", because we're just the smallest team in the league. That your power forward is the size of,
Is that
Devin
Brantley?
Booker. That's Brantley. He's 6'5", 250.
He doesn't play like a power forward.
No, he's a shooter.
He plays like a 2-3.
Yeah, he's like a small forward. He's not a... I agree. I mean, since power forward, you start getting up to 6'9", 6'10" with most of the league. He's small for a small forward, so...
Well, I guess Mitchell's small for a shooting guard too, so...
like I said,
shooting guards are normally 6'4", 6'5".
The Jazz are just tiny, and they're playing really well without it, since when, Gobert's in the center, when he's in the center position, that helps everybody else, so... Hey, well, my brain is dead. Thanks everyone for watching up to this point. We really appreciate it. Join me this afternoon for the post game on the Lakers game, and join us Monday as well for that one. Thanks again for joining. Like, subscribe, comment, and we'd love to have more discussions about what you think about Dwyane Wade being a new owner for the Utah Jazz, and how you feel like Donovan Mitchell's injury is going to impact them. So thanks so much, and go Jazz.